Well, David, thank you. This has been a great visit. I really enjoyed hearing your story and how passionate you are about our work. Thanks for everything that you and your wife do for us. We greatly appreciate it. And I look forward to seeing you at the event in September.
That's great, Joe. I look forward to seeing you.
Yeah.
But why haven't you asked me? Why didn't he ask me?
Do you validate parking?
No, that's not the question I'm looking for.
Okay.
All right, so
How'd you get so handsome?
Well, that works too. But obviously I have white hair. That means I'm of a certain age. I've been a very loyal donor to your organization. And nobody has yet asked me if I've included the organization in my estate plans or in my will or any language to that source. Why didn't you ask me?
Because you told me not to for this video?
Well, that works too. But that's actually one of the questions, and one of the things that we talk about a lot is at what point is it appropriate to actually ask for somebody to leave something in your estate plans, in your will, the trust, et cetera, and why don't development officers do that? So let's talk about why don't development officers do that first. Myriad of reasons. The number one that I get is, I'm asking you about death. It's about dying. I'm not comfortable talking about death. I'm not going to talk about your will. Now, the reality is we're not talking about death. We're talking about planning. When your parents, when you have a kid, you plan for college, most parents. They start putting money away in 529s. You plan for retirement. We take out 401ks, IRAs, pensions, whatever it is. We work our whole life. We plan if there's something wrong, happens to us and we have a minor kid, we have a will that provides who's going to take for it. We plan our whole life. And at some point in time, we start thinking about dying and we start planning for that. And if we're not, we're actually doing a disservice to our family members. So when you ask that question, you're not really asking, okay, when are you going to die? Although I'd love to have that answer, Joe. What you're really doing is saying, let's plan. Let's talk about planning. Have you thought about planning? And thereby, the development officer, it can really get over that hump of, I'm uncomfortable talking about death. You're not. It's planning. The second reason is they're afraid of the answer. And they don't know what to do if they get an answer of, oh, I'd like to, or yes, I will. And that's just a lack of training. What happens when somebody says, oh, yes, I have put you in the will? What's the next step? For most organizations, the next step is, how much have you put in the will? And, what is it going to be for? And will you tell us? And will you give us a copy? Will you sign something so we can book it? It's all about booking. And the reality is it's not really all about booking necessarily. And under a lot of the rules that govern how we book gifts, if you have an estate commitment and you can ascertain or have a writing, you can book it even though it's, quote, revocable versus irrevocable. So it's not about that. But there are certain things that you can discuss with donors if you have the education to further and get some of that information. So, for example, Joe, thank you for putting us in the will. Thank you for letting me know that. Have you given any thought as to what you would like your funds to do? Because, if you leave it to my organization, just say, ABC charity, that I could use it or the organization could use it when we get it to pay the electric bill. So is there anything specific that you would like to accomplish with those funds?
That's a great question. I was chatting with a donor last week, a longtime donor of an organization, and well into her 80s, and I asked her that question. She said I knew she had already included the charity in their plans, and I was doing assessment for the charity, for our client, and so I knew that, and she said, wow, I never thought about that. And she kept harping on it. She's like, that's such a great question. Wow, I really had to think about that. Thank you so much for bringing that up. I never thought about it, right? So we assume in our business so many things that we assume because we're in it and we're working with it all the time that donors are thinking about this stuff. They're not. Some are not.
Some are, some aren't.
Right.
But it's a conversation to have to test that and also to help direct.
Yeah.
I mean, if you know an individual's passion and they just leave it to the organization generally, you can start pointing it to that passion to make them feel better, possibly even getting a larger gift out of the estate plan. But there's also, a lot of people don't want to have that conversation because they don't know how to ascertain how much is in the will. And look, there's a certain percentage of people when they tell you you're in the will that they're never going to tell you what's in it. They're afraid that if I let you know, then all of a sudden I'm going to get bombarded with, annual fund appeals and things, that I normally don't get, which typically, if you're a good charity and running it the way it should be, is not the case. But one of the things that we talk about is testing the level. So, I mean, you could come out and say, okay, so what have you, left us in the will? I mean, it's okay to say that if they've volunteered the information, but there's ways of doing it that you're not actually saying that. So, Joe, I pretending I think you went, what's the St. Joseph's was your university? And you've just told me that you left us in the will, and thank you very much, Joe. Have you given any thought? And we're talking about scholarship, and you said, well, maybe I'd like to do it in a scholarship. I said, would you like to do an endowed scholarship? What's that, you ask, and I would explain what that is. And by the way, to do one with your name on it and to be able to designate the purpose, most organizations have a minimum, it's $100,000. And Joe could either respond, it's something that I can do, or he can respond, well, not quite where I was thinking.
Or are you high?
Or are you high? But are you high is actually an okay answer, because I now know that you don't have $100,000 in your will that you're leaving to us. So it's a way of setting kind of a bar of some sort and getting the over or the under without coming out and saying, what have you left us?
How much, right?
Okay. And I find when you get in a discussion like that, you get an awful lot of information. It also opens up the conversation. I mean, I appreciate you leaving the will, but, I understand you have an IRA or, do you have an IRA or 401k? Have you given any thought that maybe it would be better to leave us a part of that than in the will and do something structured? Why was that? And it gets into that conversation. It's just though asking that original question, asked me, have you left charity in your will? And I always do it, have you left charity in the will? I don't do, would you like to, information? I don't know, have you thought about it? I ask straight out, have you left charity, or have you put charity in your will? Simple question, yes, no, maybe, never thought about it. It gives you all kinds of options to follow up with, because if I don't ask that question of the donor, the religious institution's going to, the museum they're active is with, whatever other organizations they're active, somebody else is going to ask that question. And if they have the propensity to put somebody in the will, it's going to be them more than me, because I haven't asked.
Sometimes it's about just showing up, right?
Sometimes.
A little bit, yeah.
But it's really about controlling the conversation. I was asked to do a presentation to one of the AFP chapters local in the Philadelphia area. And what they wanted me to talk about is, what language does a donor use to indicate they want to talk about plan giving, basically. And I rotated that. And I said, there's certain things that we always listen for, like I wish I could do more, but I'm worried about this, or I have to put my kids through college. I wish I could do. They're all trigger words, et cetera, et cetera. But I kind of take a different approach with it, and I find it's working more and more, and I'm actually having more conversations than less. And that is, I ask everybody that simple question, and then it leads into a more thorough question. I don't wait for them to basically say to me, "Oh, I'd like to discuss plan giving with you." I'm asking everybody. And I'm going back now, I'm asking my 40-year-olds, and I'm working with clients who I'm saying, there's nothing wrong with talking to a 25-year-old. The likelihood of them doing it is, very slim, but I've worked with clients who have gone to a 25-year-old who's got their first job. They've been active with the organization for a few years. They're enamored. They may have gone to school there, or it's just something that they do. And have you given any consideration of, putting charity in your will? Or have you put charity in the will? I don't even have a will. Of course you don't have a will. Yeah, but there's other things. For example, do you have a life insurance policy at your organization? Now I've opened up that conversation. Do you get that as part of your employment package? Yeah. Do you know you could actually designate us as like a 10% beneficiary? I'm assuming at this point you have no married, not kids. You probably designated your parents. And if you think that's where you needs to go, that's great. But would you consider maybe? And I've had a number of 20-year-olds actually, change their beneficiary designations. Now, I'm not booking it. I'm going to steward them. The odds of us getting it, but what I've done is I've planted that seed, estate gift, insurance proceeds, that when they are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and we get to a point, if we've been stewarding them right, the odds of us getting into that plan are far more increased than waiting until they're in their 60s and 70s for me to be asking.
And if properly stewarded, their outright giving will most likely increase, right? So. Yeah. Good stuff. Top takeaways for our audience. Ask.
Ask.
Ask and ask.
And then ask.
All right. I'm Joe.
And I'm David.
and we are Gift Planning Development. I'm sure of that. Yes,
Yes.
we are. And if we can be helpful, helping you start a gift planning program or take an existing one to new heights, you can reach us on our website, giftplanningdevelopment.com. You're waiting to see if I make a mistake,
I
aren't
am
you?
waiting to see if you make a mistake.
You can
All these videos, you've not once made a mistake.
email us at info@giftplanningdevelopment.com, and you can reach us at 610-653-7906. Until next time, all the best. Say goodbye. Say goodnight, David.
Good night, David.